What's up, guys? Welcome back to LaFlamme Throwers, your connection for the best in sports news and analysis, specifically NFL football. I'd like to welcome my co-host, Steve True North, and Michael Frog LaFlamme. And we have a very special guest on with us tonight. We have Dr. Miguel Busquets, who is a award-winning, world-recognized retina specialist who happens to be from Pittsburgh, although he recently migrated here to Lexington, Kentucky to join our retina practice. Miguel lived in Pittsburgh for almost 20 years. He followed the Steelers as a diehard. He's a big Pittsburgh guy, a big Pittsburgh fan, knows several of the Steelers and coaches personally. So, Miguel, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Miguel, I got to say, it's amazing that we have to go outside of Pittsburgh to find a fan that has all their teeth. Because if we were going to talk to somebody directly in Pennsylvania, we would be missing some teeth and we'd see a lot of gum action. So it's good to have somebody that can articulate answers, because that part of the country, they're hard to understand.
Miguel, it's funny that Cleveland is taking those shots.
I'll try to represent well.
So Miguel, we've got a lot of dogs in the fight here. I'm a Colts fan, Steve's a Bengals fan, and Frog is a Browns fan. So there's a lot of conflict brewing here. Let me ask you, who is your favorite Steelers player that you've had over the decades?
Over the decades, I would say it's Jerome Bettis. He was just so true to the Steeler mystique and the Steelers way of doing things, of just kind of pounding through the middle, grabbing that ball, whether it be for 1 yard or 15 yards, getting the yards necessary, getting the touchdowns, and just the consistency of that player. The Steelers are known for defense, but Bettis's style as a running back really, I think, exemplified everything that the Steelers are about. It's just kind of that tough smash mouth football and just getting the job done.
So Miguel, I was just having some fun, and really the Browns thing, I was a diehard till they moved, and then more or less I root for whoever was paying me, and then I root for the story. But what really frustrated me as a diehard Browns fan, and I moved when I was in high school, is I love Jerome Bettis because I used to love the Fighting Irish, and I had a Bettis Rams jersey. Then when he went to the Steelers, I was like, I can't go there. But, man, the Steelers were doing everything I wish the Browns could be. Tough, hard-nosed football, running it like the way that I always dreamt that the Browns would run it. And, it's a first-class organization. And I just poke fun, but, literally there is it's a franchise I admire, and I really, really enjoy. I enjoy when they do well. I just don't enjoy it when they do well that I have to deal with Ohioans that are Steelers fans.
Against your tape, right? No, but you're right. That smash mouth approach, I mean, it just goes back to the 70s and the days of the Steel Curtain. And what's really cool about the organization is just the continuity over the years. Franco Harris, still hangs out. Rocky Blyer, Mel Blount, those guys are still around. They go to Heinz Field. You see them downtown. Bettis has a restaurant downtown now. And I think that mindset and that culture, really makes a difference. It really carries through from over the generations. And I think it really, those values are instilled in the current players, and it kind of creates almost the strategy that they use, from game to game, and the mindset and the philosophy. It's carried over from generation to generation, from decade to decade.
So, we saw a lot of really big name free agents migrate away from, or players migrate away from Pittsburgh, yet they continue to maintain a level of really good play. This year was maybe a little bit of a drop off. With the leaving of Antonio Brown and Lavelle, which of those two players do you think hurt the most, or was last year's season all about not having Big Ben?
It wasn't all about not having Big Ben, in my opinion. I mean, I think that's a big part of it. He's just been such a consistent force there, and not just from his playing ability, but just the maturity. He's almost like it's hard to believe, it kind of speaks to my age as well, but he's kind of like the dad of the group. But I think losing Antonio Brown and that talent, really hurt the flow and the chemistry that team had developed on offense over, the last really, 10 years or so. That was really a big part of getting that team to the next level, was kind of developing that high-powered offense, starting to score some more points. Big Ben having that go-to guy, receiver that he could get to almost automatically. And I think we saw when that happened that, that chemistry started to fall apart a little bit. So there's probably a number of things. I think that was probably an instrumental piece. And then when Ben, with the elbow injury, that was kind of almost a perfect storm that led to last year's season. And, as a Steeler fan, I'll say, if our worst year is 8-8, we'll take it. So, but I think that really was those two things were really a blow to the potential that was there.
A bigger loss than LeVeon Bell. And was LeVeon Bell a product of that system in Pittsburgh, or was it just a fact of being a running back and how short the lifespan is for those players?
I don't think it's the system. I think, Froggy, you can probably correct me on this, but my understanding is that the running backs have a, lifespan of about 3 years in the NFL as it is on average. It's a tough game. They play a smash mouth game in Pittsburgh. But I don't think there was anything specific about the way the Steelers were doing things that, contributed to that.
Miguel, speaking of Antonio Brown, you said that you thought he was the key loss, the key departure that kind of changed things for Pittsburgh last year. Obviously, that's been quite the odyssey, witnessing what's happened with Antonio Brown from his brief stay with the Raiders, all the off-field stuff we've seen after the fact. What do you attribute to that? Is that something where the Pittsburgh culture was just able to rein his personality in? Or do you buy into the fact that some people are attributing it to things like CTE and Vontaze Burfict's concussion that he delivered during their 2015 playoff game? What do you think about Antonio Brown? What's the reason behind what we saw after he left Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think everybody's, wondering that in Pittsburgh and outside of Pittsburgh as well, because, I mean, there was a time, and not that long ago, when he was a very stable, reliable, not just stable, reliable player, but a stable, reliable human being, kind of a bastion of society. I would see him at our kid's school. He had, his son would go to the school and he would come in. He was a good dad. He'd pick up his child, and a respected member of the community. CTE, I mean, that's definitely crossed people's minds. I mean, and you mentioned the big hit, and obviously taking a lot of hits over a career, and the complete 180 from what we knew him as as a citizen of Pittsburgh and a Steelers citizen to what we saw afterwards has to point to something beyond just ordinary life changes and just somebody having a bad period of time. So, my estimation is there's probably something like that going on, and I actually see it as a sad thing. I mean, if that is the case, it's you got to feel bad for the guy. You really do.
Yeah, no, I agree. To a point, you certainly have to feel bad about it developing that way. Kitch, I know you're usually hosting, but I'm curious. You and Miguel are both physicians, and from your perspective, what do you think about Antonio Brown? Do you think this screams of some kind of, immediate mental change, or, what's your outsider's perspective on the change in his behavior?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, just that spontaneity, the kind of the way he was reacting to things, kind of the way he undid his career, it just doesn't fit with what we saw from Antonio Brown for the first 5 or 6 years of his career, where, as Miguel said, a very stable guy. I think CTE has parallels coronavirus in a lot of ways, in that we just don't know a lot about it. And the problem is that in so many instances, it can be undiagnosed until you get to the point at which something tragic happens. And then on a brain autopsy, they find out that you just had this tremendous amount of injury that wasn't perceivable on MRIs or present imaging. So I'm very worried about what's going on with him.
So switching gears to the other expert on the panel, Frog, you've been around a whole lot of NFL football players with all the various teams you've been with. And I'm sure that you've seen players change personalities and go through different, behavior shifts when they go from one team to the other. What's your take on Antonio Brown? Do you think it's that unique? Or do you notice the same thing with players when they've experienced a change of scenery?
Yeah, there's a lot to unfold. So a lot of it is like we don't know and there's unknown. And I want to be very cautious on some of the things, but I can at least talk intelligently on as far as when you do have that change of scenery, it can be a shock to the system, especially if you didn't really want to go. And I don't think he wanted to go. He just wanted more money. No, those are two separate things. And he would have left to get more money, but he didn't want to go from everything it looked like. Then all of a sudden he gets traded to a place that it's just not very structurally sound from the outside looking in. Now, I mean, people put on a happy face when they get traded because there's a contract to be had, and you got to put your best foot forward. But I've seen people, and I don't want to share the story, but where we traded a player and he broke down and cried and he was all sorts of messed up. And we're like, wow, you actually liked it here. But at the same time, that player also found a way to embrace his new city situation. And it was the best thing that ever happened to him. So I've seen it happen for the positive, but also I think that was definitely a blow to him. And then there's a lot of other societal things that might be dealing with, like people are addicted to their technology or their brand. And he had shown a penchant to be addicted to social media, or at least social media had a big impact on his life. So like those are a lot of different things that are going around to where I feel a bit more comfortable to talk about as opposed to the actual like brain items, or if there's something that is a lot more that's going on the inside.
So Frog, it sounds like what you're saying is that people are spending way too much time on Zoom calls, on YouTube, on Twitter, and mediums like that. Is that right?
No, they're not spending enough time on LaFlamme Throwers, where you should definitely subscribe and tell a friend, and then have that friend tell a friend and subscribe, and then do whatever you can to watch YouTube. Matter of fact, just have it on a continual loop. Keep your computer plugged in and just hit playlist, play all, let it run, and then when you check back in 8 hours later, hit play again, and then text another friend to subscribe. So YouTube's different. All the other things are issues. Until we're on Spotify.
So Miguel, you've gotten to see the Bill Cowher regime, the Mike Tomlin regime, and there's occasionally, like last year, you heard these rumors that Pittsburgh fans were wanting a change and that they thought that maybe they needed a new coach. Characterize the difference of the teams under Cowher and Tomlin. And then do you think that most Pittsburgh fans believe that it's time to move on from Tomlin, or is that just something that's created by the media?
I think that's more created by the media. I will say, as a Steeler fans do feel that it's our God-given right to win the Super Bowl every year. So whenever things are going in the wrong direction, you will start to hear rumblings about, we need to change right now. Something needs to change immediately. But deep down inside, the city is loyal. The fans are loyal. And I really think that's more, reactionary than true, than a true feeling or sense within the city, and the media starts to ride that. So, the fans are loyal. More importantly, the Rooneys are loyal to the team that they put together. So, we've seen this before. We've been through tough patches. And 8-8 season is not, going to be the reason to make a big change. I mean, we know, Ben's probably approaching the end of his career, whenever that might be. So there's going to be some changes there. But, I think Tomlin's there to stay. I don't think there's going to be a significant change there. And yes, between, the Cowher era and the Tomlin era, at the end of the Cowher years, if you recall, he started to develop and evolve into that more, high-flying offense model that carried into, Tomlin's tenure a little bit. So the smash mouth football and the defense is still there. There's been a little bit more of a focus on offense, perhaps more recently, but while still, staying true to the Steeler roots. If anything, the difference is that perhaps it's just a little less drama. Tom was just kind of a quiet, drama-free guy. Doesn't seem to be seeking the spotlight, and he's maybe not as much of a showman. And people respect that. People respect the fact that I think when he came in, he was the second youngest, if not the youngest coach in NFL, history. And so, he's done a good job, and he's carried the team through thick and thin. So I think the fans are loyal, and I think, I think the rumors of change are probably overstated.